What is up, guys? My name is Matt Workman for Cinematography Database, and today we're going to be designing a house using Set Designer, and it's going to look something like this. So this one is sort of complicated with a lot of different sections. We're basically going to make a really simple version of that. And for that, we're going to need to go to Set Designer Parametric, which is relatively new, and you'll see that I've added 4 new things here. You're going to need the door, the roof, the wall, and the window, and we're now supporting both Cinema 4D, Physical, and Redshift. That's what that means, and eventually Octane and possibly other things. But go ahead and download this door, roof 1, wall type 2, and window type 5. So here we are in Cinema 4D. You can load them into your content browser. My content browser is a mess. I am actively developing all this stuff, but you'll see that I have a set designer for Physical and a set designer for Redshift. And Redshift has some of the previews of what else is coming, like stop signs and some other things, but we're going to go back and do this within Physical because I haven't really done any tutorials yet on Redshift. Only the very quote-unquote advanced people are using that at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to double-click and bring in this wall. We'll bring in a window, and we're going to also bring in the roof, and then we're going to also bring in the door. And I'm going to have to rename these to some degree. This whole system just keeps evolving, but this eventually will be like hundreds of things that will all work together to make building sets a lovely, fun experience. So let's see. We're done. I think this is it. This is our house. This looks lovely. I would love to live here. I would love to shoot in this location. So let's look at these things one at a time. I'm going to hide this, and if you guys don't know about hiding, you click these little, what do they call it? Like stop signs or stoplights over here. And the top one will hide it from being in the viewport, and the bottom one will stop it from being rendered. So gray is default. That forces it to be visible. That forces it to be hidden. I don't know if I've ever covered that before. So we're going to start with wall type 2. If you played with wall type 1, which was kind of from the old Set Designer, it's cool, but I've broken it up into pieces because it was too complex, and I tried to build a couple like sets with it, and it didn't work out very well. So this is the new one, wall type 2, and it is a framing and drywall wall. So when you click on it, I'm going to make this a little smaller because we're not going to do a ton of materials. When you click on it, you're going to get a bunch of attributes down here, and they are now separated into 3 different categories, and I'm starting to separate these things out a lot more. If you click and drag, you can select all of them and see all the controls at once, or you can just see them one by one so you don't see things you don't need to see. So they're pretty straightforward, I think. We have the width, and so as you drag this and make it less wide, you'll see that these beams or studs get added, and this is the framing aspect of this object. And they're 2x4 studs, and they're being added every 24 inches. There are other standards for building house walls, but this is the one that I decided to go with. And again, these aren't like structurally like sound. Like when I finish building this house, you're not gonna be able to like take it to an architect and be like, build this exact thing. But it does give us somewhat of a real world based structure when we're building houses so that we don't just build like really weird dimensioned rooms that don't make any sense. Same thing happens with the height, but you'll see that if I change this, nothing is changing. That's because I have used preset heights selected, because when we're using this as like say a flat object, like flats, like a stage flat or a movie flat, they're usually built in very specific heights, and I have those here. So we have 8 feet, 10 feet, you gotta click away, 12, 14, 16, but we'll just keep it at 8. 8's like kind of the standard residential house ceiling height that most rooms and houses are built at. And let's select it again. The other thing we have here is enable studs, which is going to either add or remove all the studs in between. I very much like having them. You'll see as I build the room here, you may not want those, and it makes it a little bit simpler. And then you can also change the stud dimension, because right now it is a 2x4, so it's 4 inches here, or actually 3.5, but we won't go over that. You can also make it 2x6, which is the other standard for mostly exterior walls in the US, though I think the majority still are just 2x4. So that is the framing part of this. I have like the different rooms or tabs that you would start with. So this is going to allow you to create your frame. It auto adds the studs. It does get a little bit weird at the edge here, like where like there probably would be one there, but it needs to hit a certain number for it to add it. This is how this is going to play out. The next tab here is the drywall. So we have an internal drywall side. So it's going to basically add a piece of virtual drywall there. And what you would do in real life is then you would add like wallpaper, a painting, and there's different finishes for it. But for us, we're going to basically apply our wall finishes directly to this. There's the same thing on the external wall. And if this was actually the exterior of a house, we would have to then add some weathering and then like a siding, like with like different types of siding that there are for houses, which we will not be doing in this video. But this is the basic wall object. It's really important, I think. I think this is going to allow us to build much more realistic rooms, but while still keeping it simple and not having it be too complex like a full-on architecture program. So we have the materials here too, which I will briefly cover because we haven't really done materials yet, at least for the new people. Say we want to make our walls orange, we'll do something like this. You could also double click it here, and we're in the color up here. This is all I recommend you staying with for now if you're just new to this. So pick a color, something like this. I think the house I'm moving into, the walls are like this color, sadly. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on our wall, and if we have material controls open, what we can do is we can click and drag this to go there. And so now we have switched that material from being default white to this color that we now control the color of right there. So this is how we're going to more or less create really simple colors of the walls. If we want to add textures like bricks and wood and stuff like that, I will show that in a separate video. But let's undo this. I'm actually going to delete this all the way out and just bring in another one, which is great. So we have this, and I'm going to just start by renaming it wall 0, 1, 0, 1. And so what we're going to do now is start building our very, very, very simple room. So with this object, it's safe to just basically hold control, and then you're going to drag it and let go, and you made another copy. You can also, up here, which this renamed it this, I'm going to name it 2, 2. You can also hold control and up here drag, and now you got this one, except what happens is that it hasn't moved, it's directly on top of the other one. So I'm going to hit R, or you can go up there, and I'm going to grab this one, hold shift, and it snaps it to 10-degree increments. And so now I'm going to show you that our cornering system for this is not very good. As in the real world, you don't corner like this. It has a very specific way that corners get built with frames. For us, we're going to fake it. We're just going to go like that, and it's going to be okay. Because again, we're not actually building this house. We just want it to be like sort of close. Over time, I am going to make this closer and closer to how houses are actually framed and built. But for now, we're keeping it, excuse me, we're going to keep it pretty simple, simplified. And the cornering will hopefully be automated. So eventually, my idea is that if these get close enough, they will auto-corner themselves. That is one of the goals for this plugin. So next, we're going to take wall, this one, 3, and I'm going to hold control, and I'm going to drag out another wall. And I very much like using this kind of like framing analogy here. It's not really an analogy here, it's kind of like a rough simulation, because you can see through the walls as you're building them, and it kind of just feels like you're building a set. And I think if you showed this to a carpenter or a production designer or a director, or really anyone that's done anything like this, this would start to, it would look familiar. Right? And it forces you essentially right now to keep the walls at a realistic dimension so they're not getting like really wide and they're all different. It just bases this whole process in reality, which is the goal of Set Designer. So next we're going to draw, what are we going to do? We're going to name this thing 4. It's really, really quite helpful to name these things as you go. What we're going to do here, I don't know if I've done this in the video yet, but we're going to hold this and we're going to grab a null. So that sounds kind of like confusing, but it's just a way of grouping things together. That's how we're going to use it. And what I'm going to say and name this is walls. So I'm going to grab all of these, drag it into walls, and then close it. So everything that is walls is in this walls group. And it keeps it nice and organized. Really important thing moving forward, especially for this tutorial. So next what we're going to do is add a floor. Pretty important. We're going to go in here again. These are parametric objects, so you're not technically 3D modeling. I'm going to try to keep us away from 3D modeling for quite a while. We're going to grab a plane, which is just a 2D object, rectangle. And if you middle mouse click, or you go up to this thing, up here, we're going to go to our top view, and we're just going to roughly center this. So this tutorial, we're not doing any snapping, there's no precision, we're all just kind of eyeballing a lot of this. In future videos, if we want to like nail proportions and get this exactly the same as a real location or use a floor plan, I will show that workflow too. You just gotta let me know in the comments or the forum or the Facebook group if that's something that we're actually interested in, is that level of precision or not. But this is like a fun way to just start prototyping a room if you are a director, production designer, or a DP. So we have our floor now, and I'm going to double click. I'm not even naming these, which is bad, but I'm going to say floor. And we're just going to leave it as, well, let's make it like roughly wood color. I will eventually show you how to make wood materials. I have a bunch available if you're a Set Designer user, which I imagine you are if you're watching this, because otherwise you don't have any of these things. But there we are. We have our floor. I will name it floor. And lovely walls and a floor. Very good. So now what we need to do is introduce something called a rough opening, which is exactly like it sounds. It's an opening that a door would go in, or a floor, or a window rather. So I'm sorry, we just clicked up here, clicked a cube, and this cube again is parametric, and all you have to do to change its size is grab these little tiny dots and move them around. So really simple. Love this about Cinema 4D. So we're gonna make, where's the front here? I'm gonna call, well, it doesn't really matter at all, does it, I guess. I'm gonna move this here like this. And what's important as we're making a rough opening for a door here, which you can always move this around, not a big deal. What's important is that this overlaps this way so that there's a cube on both sides of the wall. And then for the door, you wanna make sure that it's a little bit below as well. So again, we're not gonna use numbers. We're not gonna type in things here too much. We're just gonna roughly eyeball this. I'm gonna say like, I'm gonna make the door about this tall. And if you want like a quick human reference in here, you can go up to here and go to figure, which in R19 and maybe 18, I believe comes in at like normal human scale. But you can also, I think, go up to this and change its height. And it's in centimeters. Everything's in centimeters. So get used to it. So we're gonna, put this here. I think this guy's like roughly like 6 feet tall or something like that. And yeah, that's a reasonable size for a door. And that's it. So I'm gonna name this cube door. And now we're gonna add 2 windows. I'm going to hold Control and just drag this over there. A lot of Control dragging and duplicating. I'm gonna make it a little bit shorter like this, kind of a large window. I mean, it's all relative to like what we're actually designing. So that's our window, something like this, window. And I'm going to then hold Control and drag out another window. So those are where we're planning to put windows. So if you're following a plan, you're gonna have to, match those out and be like, okay, this window's 100 by 100. You're gonna need to write 100 by 100 in there, or just eyeball it in this case. So what we need to do is cut out these from the actual frame. So we're gonna make another group, or a null, and we're gonna call it rough openings like this. And then we're gonna take the door, the window, and put it in this group. So we're staying nice and organized here. We have our walls, we have our rough openings. So now we need to cut them out. This is the most complex thing. We're gonna do the whole tutorial. We're gonna go to bool. If you've never used it before, it's a Boolean. It's very, very easy to use. I will show you right now. We're gonna put walls in there, and then we're gonna put rough openings under it. And magically, it has cut holes in our frames here where those cubes were. Really straightforward, really easy. I love this. I love this about Cinema 4D. You do this in any other 3D program, it's a lot more confusing. We want to click on walls, and we want to just get rid of high quality. And there it is. So now what we have now is this Boolean object that is the walls. It's our frame. And what we can do now, the reason I'm designing it this way and recommending people do it, is that you can go into here. You can select all your walls now. And if we go back to drywall controls, we can click and build the frames. And we have our holes, or our rough openings, as you would call it, if you were an actual carpenter, cut out. And now we just need to add a door and add some windows. So very nice. I like this, being able to grab all the walls at once. I can make it see-through, because I love being able to see through while seeing the studs. There's just something really, something really interesting about that. So I spent a long time designing that so I could do it. And I guess we'll leave the walls drywalled up. Now, in reality, you would have to put beams here and beams there and support beams and whatnot. But, for us, I just don't have that level of detail. Perhaps in the future, I will be able to actually use this as a BIM software and call out how many 2x4s and nails and stuff if that's important to people moving forward. I don't think it's important right now. And so what's also important to remember is that you can just come in here. If you don't like the placement of the door, you can just move it. You just move it around. You can just change its size. Nothing's permanent yet. We haven't baked anything into this model. It's all parametric. You just move it around. You can have fun. You can then now go and make more rooms and make more openings and more windows. And I think you guys can see like how you would make this into like a full set. But now let's keep moving here. We're going to go to our door type 1. which I'm going to rename to just door 1, and I'm going to unhide it. So there's our door, and we're going to add this door. It's right here. We're going to add it just like you would add a real pre-hung door to a real rough opening in a wall. So I'm going to spin it, holding shift, hit E, and I'm just going to slide it over here. And there it is. And so there's 2 ways of handling this. This door comes in at like a quote-unquote normal size for a residential house. So you could either make the rough opening the right size, or you can make, you could either go into here and find our door 1, and we could just like shrink it in so it fits. That's one perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable way to do this. So like that, and we would call this a day more or less. So we grab the door. We have to make sure that it's like, the trim is showing on both sides like that. Pretty cool. Like that. Or you could have actually grabbed the door, and if you go to controls, dimensions, you can actually change its width here. So we could have changed it to the size of the opening. But in this case, this door comes in at like a rather normal size that's realistic and very common. So I kind of make the opening fit it. Clicking on the door once again, though, there's a lot of controls. I don't think you'll mess with many of these, but the important one here is to be able to show and hide the door if you want to. I don't really know why I made that option, but you can, maybe as part of development. But more importantly, for architectural visualization is that you can open the door. So you can leave it a little bit open, a little bit closed, and a lot of the times you just leave it open. It could also be part of your scene. You could technically animate it as well. And you'll see that this door has a lot going on. I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time making this thing. It's got realistically sized hinges, more or less realistic handles, and there's a lot of customizable options in here if you want to. You can change the materials out per object. This changes where the handle is and stuff like that, but they come in more or less ready to go for the people that don't ever want to mess with that. So there's our door, and this door would also work really well for a closet. It isn't technically a front door. It's not, because it doesn't have a threshold and a whole bunch of other things that need to happen. But there we go, we've added a door. Now let's add the windows. It's the same, oh, that's the roof. It is the same exact process, let me tell you. Dash 01, and we're gonna get you back. And I'm just gonna roughly put it there. And in this case, I definitely wanna make the window just to the size of the opening that we were thinking about here. And yeah, we're just gonna go to the window, and under SD controls, we have alignment, which you don't really need to mess with, but it kind of changes where the window's being created from. We're going to just either hold or click and drag until this is the right size. And you don't have to get the framing perfect. I mean, it looks better if you do get it perfect. Like you can line up this internal frame perfectly with the opening, and this trim is meant to go over it. But as long as there's no hole showing, it really doesn't matter at all. So we're just going to kind of roughly get this the right size, and something like that looks... it looks okay. And there's trim on both sides, and this window doesn't have as many options as the door, but you can change the size of the trim. And this is called an apron down here, the sash, and again, the materials, but we won't mess with that. In other windows, there's options to add glass. This has no glass in it, just for simplicity. You can add mullions, which is like cross grid patterns that happen in most windows. And then eventually we're gonna have curtains, blinds, all sorts of stuff. But this is the basics here. What we're going to do here, might be somewhat new to some people, is we're going to go up to here. So with the window selected, instead of using control and dragging over, that's fine. It's a little bit lighter on the system if you do what's called an instance. So this is just a copy. And what happens is if you change the if you change the original, like this, if I change something about this, like say its height, they both change. And it's also a little bit lighter on the system to have an instance. I think it's just less for it to think about. So it's a little faster to do it this way. So what we're gonna do now, because we're finished with this phase, I'm going to make something called windows and doors. I keep mistyping because I have to like sit funny to do the screen capture. And we're gonna take the door, the window, and the window and put those in our new group, like this. So we're staying very organized. We have our floor, as we recap real quick. We have our floor, we have our windows, we have our floor, our walls with the rough openings grouped together, and then we have our windows and doors. And we've basically done the majority of the workflow that I wanted to show you. So with this, you should be able to add like 20 windows to like an office building. If you want to make, you know, a more complicated layout, you're just going to make more walls, make more openings. And this is the basics of it. So I'm going to show you a little bit more here, and maybe we'll try to make like, I'll show you kind of like a preview of what the full workflow will look like, though it'll evolve for quite a while. But we're going to unhide our roof here. And this is a simple gable roof is what it's called. I'm going to actually type directly into the height because I know what this is. It's 8 feet. You can write FT and it will translate it. Over here, we're going to roughly center her. Center the old roof. I forget what it's called when you prefab roofs like this. I know some construction people do that. What we're going to do there is change the span. This is, I believe, the correct term for it because you're spanning between this, this top plate and this top plate. You're spanning that distance. And I'm going to shrink it down. And what you want to do is have it be pretty much lined up like that. And if you want to create what is called an overhang, we'll do that in a second. But you'll see that this object, just like our walls, comes with a nice little frame in it every 24 inches. I think it just adds like a lot to the, just like the realism of this. And also if you wanted to make an attic scene or have an exposed roof, you kind of have the beginnings of it. So I'm just kind of lining that up here. I'm going to change the length to roughly fit our room. You see it added another, these are rafters and that's a ceiling cross or something like that. I forget what it's called. And so that is the beginning of your gable roof, single floor house here. And if you want to add, I'll go to framing controls here. If you want to add an overhang, you're going to want to add the width first. So something like that. And then if you zoom in here, this is up to you to get right or wrong. You want to change the overhang height so that it just crosses into it just like this. It's called like a bird mouth cut, I believe, in the two before here. You just want to add that in kind of like this. So there, now we have an itty bitty amount of overhang. It's looking like a very nice but simple house. We're going to add a roof cover, which just adds 2 big old cubes on top here, but it makes it so that you don't have to go do that by hand. You can change the material of this later if you wanted to make like shingles or terracotta tiles or something like that. And then we have this end covers, which is a little bit broken. I'm not going to lie to you. It doesn't perfectly work right now. And you have to manually change its width like this. It's weird. I know that's weird. And for some reason, it doesn't work sometimes. So I'm still working on that. It's honestly better to do it manually. And the other thing I want to show you about this roof, and this is for people that are picky about roofs, as you probably should be, I guess, but this is called the fascia, this like kind of end cap here. And the reason that these are wood is because you typically would make an overhang that's basically another one of these roofs after it. I'm going to make that programmatically so you guys don't have to do that, but I was excited to get this roof out there because it kind of like makes it look like a house now. And there's a lot of other types of roofs. There's like cross-sected gables and flat roofs and all sorts of stuff. And I'll be building them all out slowly. I have a lot of fun making them at this point. So there's our basic house, really simple. If you want to end it right here, this is enough to get going and go start building some sets, somewhat realistically. But what we'd want to do here, and I'm going to build this out slowly, not slowly, I'm gonna design this over time here, is that we probably wouldn't want to use a cube, and I'm gonna make an object for this soon, but you'd want to use something like this if you want to just get going now until I build it out. I'm gonna build a foundation object and a floor object and a ceiling so that this stuff all is more automated for you. But we're essentially making a cube like this, and we would do something like that. So this is the floor, and this is the foundation, or what would be also like the basement, like this, right? And I'll make it like here. I'll make it a very short one, but I'm eventually going to make an object for that. And then if you were to make a second floor of this, you would take this, I'm going to hold control, and you would put it here, right? So if you guys know about building houses, this is like really boring. You probably know about this. I had to learn all this from scratch. I don't build houses. I had no idea. And then what I would do is I would come into here, and I would take all of these, hold control, and then I would go up again like that. So now we have like the workings of a second floor. We'd have to cut a hole out for where the staircase would be. We'd have to go in here. We'd have to add more windows. Not a big deal. We could go like this and just drag these up here. More windows happen. Then you go and you add even more windows, and you just keep going. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't have this fully automated for us yet, but it will be. And then you add your roof back on top, and you've started the process of building a house. So hopefully with a little bit more time on your end, you would be able to build something that looks much better than this. Because this is a drywall wall here, I didn't make an external finishing, so we'd have to actually add siding to it, depending on what type of siding there is, or if it's brick, we'd have to make a special object for that, which I will potentially do. We'll use an actual front door. I will make windows that are more complex, and we will just keep building stuff. But this is the basics of Set Designer as far as the parametric objects are concerned. This is going to be the foundation. I'd love to hear any feedback about the workflow. I believe this is going to allow us to build anything from like a school to an office building to residential, to treat it like flats, you know, because basically if you wanted this to be flats, you could go to the walls and just take all these and get rid of one side of the drywall, which would be like, just leave the internal. And something I wanted to mention here, because I think I screwed it up, very likely, is that because it does have an inside and an outside, you have to flip these around, and I always forget to do this. Maybe I can design something better. But this is the inside wall, essentially, which doesn't really matter, but that's the way the system is working so far. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. So much more to cover, so much more to build, but hopefully if you're looking to build semi-realistic locations and sets, that this will give you a humongous head start in making it realistic dimensions, and this is just the beginning of what we're building here. So thanks so much for watching. If you guys have any more questions, please head over to the forum at cinematographydb.com. That's where we're doing all the real support at this point. Emails and comments, you'll see that I'm the last commenter on all these. I try to respond to everybody. That's going to be the best place to do that. And again, if you want to get into this stuff and start working on the system and give feedback, Set Designer is right here. The annual subscription, really affordable, trust me, $125 a year for all this stuff, and you get all the updates. Try to go to any other online site and find something that's even close to that price. We have a whole bunch of stuff here, more being added almost I'll say every week, pretty much, beds, and we're going to make this so that for this $125, you'll be able to build like a lot of different residential, definitely locations and sets to start. Offices and other types of buildings, we'll see like what kind of evolves. But that's it, and I will see you guys on the next video.